So in this space of a ketogenic diet, it doesn't take long for patients to start asking the questions about, well, how do I get the sweetness that I've been used to for the last 30 years? The framework that I use when helping people change a behavior is a continuum. There are good choices, there are better choices, and there are best choices. And when it comes to sugar and the sweetness, there is a propensity for an addiction, a need for more. And in those cases, the best option is none. No sweetness, no sugars, no sugar substitutes. But when you're working with humans, that best option, when people land on it first, they frequently crash and burn and then go off of the plan forever. So let's look at what is good and better and leave best for the experts. So on the list of good choices, there are several of these sugar substitutes. There is a laundry list of these chemicals that do make things sweeter, but the list that makes it to my good list, the sweeteners that I think are worthy of putting on the menu, include stevia, monk fruit, erythritol, and allulose. So let's start with stevia. I put it at the top of my list of sweeteners, A, because it's found everywhere and there's lots of literature that says it really doesn't mess up much of that metabolism. Again, it's not in the better or best list, but it's good and it's better than sugar. And there are few side effects. Stevia really does have a fantastic sweetness to it, so it just takes a small amount to add the attractive sweetness that people are looking for. It also happens where it doesn't seem to spike sugars or insulin in a terrifically disastrous way, maybe in a slight way. The downside of stevia is that there are a population of folks that are allergic to it. If you have a ragweed allergy, you might find yourself allergic. Next, let's look at monk fruit. This is one of those rare sugars, and much like stevia, it's very intense. It just takes a sprinkle to add that attractive sweetness to the sweetening effect you're looking for. It has claims of an anti-inflammatory effect, and it really doesn't have a lot of side effects until you look at your pocketbook. I like to think of it as the diamond of sweeteners because every single one of those little crystals costs a lot. Most of the time in the grocery stores that I see this available, they have really tricked you. They have shown the word monk fruit on the front of the box, but if you look at that ingredients label, it's mostly mixed with other sweeteners like erythritol or stevia. The good part about both stevia and monk fruit is that there is not a lot of gut disruption as long as you're not allergic to them. It does bring me to one of the most destructive gut biome sugar sweeteners, which is erythritol. Erythritol is very popular. It's the one that has a cooling effect that you will feel when you take it. It's often how I know that they've cut it with erythritol is when I taste it. I can feel that coolness. And it really is disruptive to that gut biome. Erythritol has recently been in the news with headlines that it links to heart disease or blood clots. But when I went back and looked at that data, I wasn't overly confident that this was true. So it's still on my list of good options for sugar substitutes. Well, let's look at the last one on the list of good, and that is allulose. It's been recently in the news. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but let me do the history lesson that it got to the scene as another one of these rare sugars. So yes, it happens naturally in nature, but we found a way to mass produce it actually out of the product of corn. The bakers in this space really like allulose because it does allow you to brown the sugar. It's not as sweet as sugar. It's actually just slightly under the sweetness of sugar. And so the volume that's needed to get the outcome also seems to work well in lots of recipes. What has my attention recently is the data that it does lower blood sugars. This was something that I did hear about when it first entered the scene, but the literature wasn't very supportive and nobody could explain the mechanism of how it was lowering the blood sugar. But in recent months, there's been several scientific papers outlining how that process is working and validating that even in insulin-resistant patients, this allulose sugar was lowering their blood sugar, and it was significant enough to make it through the publications. So recently, I had a patient come in and was lamenting over the fact that in social media, she had given up her Coca-Cola and was on Diet Cokes. In the process of using a ketogenic diet while drinking Diet Coke, she'd lost 125 pounds and she'd kept it off for over a year. Yet, that social media said, but you shouldn't be drinking that sugary, sweetened drink especially because of the sweetener they use. Now, you're right, that sweetener did not make my list, but I think the patient clearly won. That weight loss and sustained weight loss for over a year is helping her metabolism to rise and to level up to the next layer of health that she's been missing for many years. I'll warn her that that intense sweetness found in these sweeteners is often linked to a relapse. In my journey of good, better, and best, I hung out with these sweeteners for quite a time, having a difficult love-hate relationship that what felt good on the lips did not feel good the next day on the backside. I recently tried allulose in the form of a bar, looking at what was the taste, how did it affect my gut, and what did it do to my blood sugars. Check out that review right here. I'll see you there.